Hello and welcome to the Irish Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Houghton. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and financial independence enthusiast, sharing my financial freedom journey. Stay tuned and welcome aboard. Thanks everyone for their feedback from the announcement on the last episode that we're going to change the format up this year and do a Q&A sort of format. So basically your questions answered. I think the general consensus was that the new format is great and very refreshing. So yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks everybody for their questions this week. So this question today is from Jill, and this has been sitting in my inbox for a while. And up until recently, I haven't really had a good opportunity to think about it. But over the last week or so, I've given this particular question a lot of thought. And Jill, I hope you're going to be happy with this answer. She says, I'm a big fan of the show. The more I consider FIRE, the more I realize that it isn't going to be possible for me to save up the million or so euro I need to retire early. I've heard you talk about generating passive income. Have you considered this as part of your overall FIRE plan? So to answer this, let's start by asking ourselves, what is passive income? All right. And look, if you Google what is passive income, you're probably going to get a whole lot of different answers. And I'm going to answer it by saying that, in my opinion, it's income that isn't tied directly to time. So while there may be work required on an activity, the equation isn't time for money, which most of us are doing when it comes to earning our income, but rather it has an ongoing income aspect of it. So you think of things like commissions and royalties and things like that. Effectively, you're looking to build a system that generates long-term income. Easier said than done though, right? Easier said than done. So let's relate this to my own passive income journey, which in its own right has been an interesting story as well. So you guys might recall that it's been about 2 years since I originally went down to part-time work. So for a long time, I'd been working 7-8 hours a day, and September 2018, I cut down to working part-time. I had a young family at the time, so it made a lot of sense from that point of view. I was also fairly bored of the day-to-day of my work as a freelance programmer, so I wanted to kind of step back from that, spend time with the kids, and also work on a whole lot of passion projects. And if you look at it on paper, now that I've gone back to full-time work, it was a fairly successful 2-year period. So I started 4 new hockey clubs, obviously got this podcast started, got the Native Woodland Co-op started, and we're planting a whole lot of native trees this year, which is amazing. And I also took the time to learn how to trade the Forex market. So I upskilled in something else, which is really, really good. And when Jill asked me this question, I initially reflected on my time off that I had and how that actually worked out for me in the long run. So the first thing I realized was, because I worked part-time for 2 years, it actually cost me around 60,000 euros in lost work, right? So my decision to go part-time instead of working full-time ultimately cost me in that 2-year period around 60,000 euros. And that's money that would have gone directly into my portfolio, likely my pension. So it would have actually been effectively 60,000 euros into the portfolio directly. Let's assume a safe withdrawal rate of 4% of that income, right? And this is typically what the FIRE enthusiasts will tell you is a fairly safe withdrawal rate. Some are now saying 3.5%, but look, to keep the math simple, we're going to go with 4%. Assuming that we were taking 4%, that 60,000 euro, withdrawing 4% a year of that, would give us 2,400 euro per year, or 200 euros per month. If that's 60,000 euros, if I were to start drawing that today, it would be 200 euros a month for me in income. Hopefully you guys kind of get how that works. Effectively, when we're building our portfolios up, we're always looking at that 4% rate, right? So if you had a portfolio of 100,000, that gives you 4,000 euros per year based on the 4% rate. Whatever's happening inside the portfolio, it doesn't really matter. We know that the market's going to move in various stages. We know that some investments are going to be bad, some are going to be good. The science is basically, well, the actual core science is basically, if you were to put that in 100% equities and index funds, that you can pretty much take 4% a year. And it's a pretty safe bet that by the time that you pass on from this earth, that money will still be there. But there was more to the story than meets the eye. So when I reflected on what I did with my time, when I went down to part-time work, I suddenly had this great opportunity to go and work on all these passion projects. But some of these projects actually started generating me a long-term passive income. All right. Now, I should point out that I wasn't concentrating at that time on building passive income. So when I was there, I was doing stuff because I was passionate about it. It wasn't always about generating income, but some of these projects did eventually generate me some income. Now, I'm not going to go into what that income is on today's episode because, to be honest, there's a whole heap of other episodes that I can cover this stuff up on. And if you guys are interested in learning more about these projects and what I'm doing, if you go to firepodcast.ie and become a member for free, then I share a lot of this information in my monthly newsletter that I send out. And just so you guys know as well, on the monthly newsletter, I'm also going to start sharing far more specifics into my actual portfolio as well. So if you guys aren't a member already, please just go along firepodcast.ie, sign up, and you will start receiving the newsletter once a month. Anyway, back to the story of passive income. So it wasn't really until this month that I actually started noticing that the passive income was starting to be quite considerable. And I'm actually going to make over 500 euros in passive income this month, which is amazing. So you guys might remember way back, I think around episode, might be 7 or 8, I talked about my plan A as being to try and become financially independent through scalable businesses, passive incomes, things like that. And I kind of gave up on the idea because I tried, and I failed. But I realized that passive income takes a long time to actually generate money. So even the wholesale directory website that I made back in 2014, it wasn't really until 2016, 2017 that started to generate me a regular income. So there's very much a delayed gratification when it comes to actually generating income from passive sources. But I'm now at a stage where I'm receiving around 500 euros a month, which is, amazing and fantastic to actually board in. So I started thinking, right, if it took me 2 years of not really trying, but 2 years of somewhat trying to generate passive income, is that better than if I'd worked full time and got the 60,000 euros into the portfolio? Right? So it's that question of, would you rather have 60,000 euros or would you rather have 500 euros a month? Well, folks, we're able to actually work that out. So here we go. A little bit of maths here, but let's see if we can do this in such a way that it's understandable. If we reverse the 4% rule, right, we can basically say, what is that 500 euro worth to us if it were capital in our portfolio? So effectively, we go 500 euros times 12 for every month of the year is 6,000 euros a year. We would then need to multiply that by 25, which is the equivalent of 4% reversed, right? Which would give us a sum of 150,000 euros. In other words, for me to generate 500 euros worth of income from an investment portfolio, based on our 4% rule, I would need to have a portfolio of 150,000 euros to safely withdraw 500 euros per month. I hope you guys are starting to realize the power that passive income potentially has, especially when you consider some of the other benefits it has. So I realized that since I went back working full time, my happiness has greatly decreased. I'm fairly miserable now on Monday to Friday. I haven't had a lot of the time that I had to concentrate on things that I loved doing before. My passion projects are virtually non-existent, spending less time with the kids. My health is out the window since I went back to full-time work. Whereas when I was working part-time, not only was I on top of all those things, but I also did some great things like introduced hockey to 300 kids, got thousands of native trees being planted, and obviously learned the skills and just being happier in general because I was spending less time doing something that I actually disliked. The last couple of points on this, guys. There was a recent interview with the Mad Fientist, Brandon. He was actually interviewed on Choose FI. I will put a link to his interview in the show notes. It's about an hour long, but it's well worth a listen. Brandon became financially independent 4 years ago, and he talks about the balance between money, time, and happiness. And he actually regrets rushing his own financial independence journey and rushing into early retirement because he felt like he sacrificed so much in terms of time and happiness when he was on his financial independence journey. And as I mentioned, I'm actually reflecting on this at the moment, right? So I am actually contemplating now eventually going back to part-time work so I can work on these passion projects and these passive income projects because I'm realizing that there's actually more potential in terms of the passive income than there is in working that way. And effectively what I'm doing at the moment is actually digging myself out of a hole, which isn't necessarily the best way to reach financial independence. Finally, for those who have read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you'll know that Robert Kiyosaki mentions in one particular part in the book, he mentions, is it easier to save $1 million or find 4,000 euros a month in passive income? And I suspect for most of us, that answer is that it's actually easier to find 4,000 euros per month. So what's the conclusion here? Well, I think in many ways, Jill, you've opened my eyes up in terms of my own journey. And I very much realize now that when I cut down and did that 2 years of working part-time, I gave myself the freedom to work on my passion projects. And that was without me even trying to create passive income. But I was able to eventually generate an additional 500 euros a month, which does look fairly safe in terms of being there for the long term. I could only imagine what would happen if I gave myself that time again when I actively tried to build passive income. Guys, we are going to be touching off a lot on passive income over the next few episodes. I really do want to share as much as I can around some of these ideas and what some of the things are that you guys can actually be doing. As I mentioned, if you are interested, please do go along to firepodcast.ie, register your details, become a member. There's a few resources on the website as well, which are very, very useful, but you can be hearing more from me in my newsletter format. Other than that, guys, if you have any questions on this episode, please reach out to me at michael@firepodcast.ie. And as always, I look forward to catching you on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're a big fan of the show, why not become an Irish Fire Podcast member for free? Members receive access to inside information that isn't shared on the podcast, as well as regular updates such as the monthly newsletter. To become a member, visit www.firepodcast.ie.